Hello! It's time to do some more paintings in my Bectober sketchbook with some Daniel Smith Triads. This time I'm going to focus on the 4 seasons. In my previous video, I painted out the other 4, which is Stormbreaker, Architectural, Evening Glow and Desert Horizons. You might like to watch that video as well if you haven't already done so. And just for a little recap, here are the swatches of those 4 themed sets. I also have a more in-depth swatching video of all 8 sets. Today I'll do a quick swatch of the seasons just to get us all back up to speed, and I'll do some paintings with the Triads. Some of them were looking pretty difficult, and so I wasn't sure how I was going to go today. Let's find out and let's get into it! Going straight into swatching, and first up we have Spring, which is Hansa Yellow Light, Opera Pink and Cobalt Teal Blue. All 3 of these are very bright colours, and they remind me so much of a fluorescent skirt I had as a 12-year-old. It was my favourite skirt ever at that time, as only a 12-year-old can love fluorescent colours. I was really doubtful as to how I was going to go with this colour palette. The other one which I'm not sure about is Summer, Quinacridone Rose, Ultramarine Turquoise and Naples Yellow. That's such a weird choice of a yellow, especially for summer. It's a good beach colour, I guess, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be very useful for other kinds of mixing, like to make a green or to have a bright yellow. Forget that. So yes, that's going to be an interesting one to paint out. Autumn, Aussie Red Gold, Rose of Ultramarine and Undersea Green. From the comments in my previous swatching video, this was hands down the most favourite set from everyone. I'd also said that I thought this was a really strong trio, and I love all 3 of the colours in this one, so I was super excited to be making some paintings with these colours today. And the last one is Winter, with that incredibly granulating Lunar Black, French Ultramarine and Cascade Green. I thought this was going to be quite an interesting one. They are very cool colours. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to paint with them though, because I'm in the southern hemisphere and it doesn't snow where I live. But having swatched them all out, I can say there's a very mixed bag, starting off with these very bright, almost fluorescent looking colours in the spring section. Cobalt Teal Blue also has a lot of granulation. Summer, on the other hand, has the same CMY palette, but it's so much more muted. Autumn's looking pretty crazy with those colours mixed together. I was the most interested to try those out. And then we have dark, cool tones for Winter. So I had my work cut out for me to come up with a variety of page spreads for these colours. Let's see how I go. I'm going to start off with Spring. And yes, I did do all the drawings in advance. I also had to buy some washi tape because I'd run out of the 5mm ones, and I think 5mm is perfect for taping borders. So I bought these off Amazon. I'll try and remember to link them. They're handy to have, and now I've got loads of them. It pretty much ended up being quite disposable. Once I peeled it off the paper, it wasn't really much good for anything else. It was so hard to pick with all these pretty designs, and I hate throwing tape out, but I found some sacrificial ones. So you'll see me taping all of my pages today as well. Alright, back to Spring, after I got sidetracked there, and I'm just using a permanent black pen to write the letters in. I did use a lettering stencil for all of these because it's so much easier. Then I've taped it up, and I'm just adding a little swatch at the top of the page there to remind us all of the colours. Hansa Yellow Light, Opera Pink and Cobalt Teal Blue. I took this photo a few years ago of a honeybee in our apple tree on the apple blossoms, but I have changed the colours up a bit to make it suitable for this colour palette. And actually, the cobalt teal mixing with the yellow made a really nice green, although you can see it's incredibly granulating because of the cobalt. But otherwise, depending on how much of that teal I added, I could get a really bright yellow green, or I could get something that was a more middle green, and then even a muted green when I mixed in just a little bit of the opera pink. So it actually is a fairly versatile palette, even though the colours are incredibly bright. And they are quite spring-like in some circumstances, although even my husband said as much. He thinks this looks like a summer palette, and I'm inclined to agree with him. I would have picked these 3 for summer myself, but they do kind of work for spring as well because I can get a spring green. Opera pink also works pretty well for blossoms like this, although they are a bit pinker than the white ones in my photo. Artistic license and all of that. But the biggest issue I had with this palette is the fact that all three colours are incredibly bright and they don't have much in the way of value, so I could not get any dark values whatsoever. I could get mid-tones at best and light colours, but no shadow colours or anything like that, so that's where the limitation came in. Yes, it is a CMY palette, so you can mix a lot of colours, including a really pretty purple with this lot, but yeah, without that value it is quite a struggle to get any kind of contrast whatsoever. Mixing the three colours together, I was able to achieve this brown, which is actually quite pretty, so it was surprisingly versatile but just not enough value, and that's where it falls down. Everything is just really bright and I couldn't get in any shadows. I also lost a bit of footage at the end here, so you'll miss some of what I did. I did outline the bee with some black pen because I couldn't get any darker. The scanner blew this picture out because even that couldn't cope with the bright colours. For the other page, I've divided it up with the tape and I'm painting some different spring blooms. All these yellow weeds which have popped up in our garden and all around the neighbourhood. They're so pretty, so they have to stay until they've finished blooming. I tried to get the colours right here, but once again I was struggling with the lack of being able to get any dark values, so everything's just looking a bit bleh at the moment, including this other one, which I actually made this picture up. I was going to draw something else and it didn't work out, so I ended up just drawing a daisy in here. We've got quite a lot of these in the garden too. I'll come back to painting the flowers, but I wanted to get the backgrounds in first. Next is a magnolia, and I wanted to paint in a very neutral browny background. I ran out of colour halfway through, so it's kind of two-toned. And just to change up the backgrounds again, I thought I would use all of the colours in the background for these daffodils, so everything isn't exactly the same colour. And this was just a made-up one, based off a couple of photos I took and then cobbled together to get different flower positions. But going back to the first picture, the yellow on its own was perfect for this, but you could just see how it's blending into the background miserably. I wasn't liking that at all, but I left them to dry and I'll come back to fix them up later. Now I'm painting in a pink daisy. Like I said, this was just from imagination and from remembering what daisies look like out of my head. I do enjoy the opera pink. It is such a bright and pretty colour. Obviously it's fugitive because it does have a fluorescent dye in it, but I don't care about that. And then I dropped in some of that cobalt teal to kind of make a purple centre. It kind of fell apart there. And I'm now painting in a few other bits of the flowers. These daffodils are also once again a very bright yellow, and I was skipping from flower to flower so that I could let areas dry and then come back to them to build up layers and hopefully get some sort of value in these. It was so hard. This was a really difficult set to use. I do like the colours, but not having any of them being dark just made it impossible to get anything other than this bright mess that you're seeing on the page right now, despite my best efforts. And this page went through a very prolonged ugly stage. I was looking at it going, oh, is it ever going to get any better? It wasn't so bad once I started adding in the darkest green I could onto the background of these yellow flowers, just to try and make them stand out a little more. I still wasn't very happy with it, but at least it was starting to improve. And then I was doing the same on some of my other flowers. I resorted to using a black outline on this picture just because I really didn't like it as it was. You could still see my pencil lines and it was just looking a horrible mess. I don't think the pen improved it that much, but at least they stand out a bit more, and I used it a bit on some of the others just to try and get some kind of dark contrast on some of these pictures. And then I'm using a white pen as well to get some bright highlights, and I think it helped a little bit. The set also makes me think of summery colours, like if you're at the pool drinking bright cocktails, swimsuits, summer dresses, pool floaties. It just makes me think of those things more than spring. But I'll peel off my tape and then we can see this page once I've finished this last little bit. I kept touching things and I should have just left well enough alone. The background had completely faded on this one and it really did need another layer. It's really hard to know when a picture is finished sometimes, and because I wasn't super happy with these, I was struggling quite a lot. But here they are, over bright from the scanner once again. And this is the finished page spread in all its psychedelic glory. Despite its horrendous brightness, I am kind of leaning towards about an 8 out of 10 for these, higher than I was expecting, because I was able to actually achieve quite a lot of mixes out of these three colours, including a lot of greens, and I really love that cobalt teal blue and its granulation. I think the three colours are really pretty, it's just that it needs a darker colour to go with it. It gets a higher score for versatility and loses points for lack of value. I think if I had a fourth shadow colour, then the spring would be a really great quadrad rather than a triad. It needs something else to make it darker, but once again that granulation has come through a lot, and I do like that. So it's not all bad, but they are very bright, and I know there'll be a lot of divided opinions as to whether this is a good or bad set. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Let's move on to summer, and I've got lots to say about this set too. Starting off with some lettering, and I'd done a fair bit of research on all of these triads to find pictures that would be suitable for the colour palettes, and summer has quinacridone rose, ultramarine turquoise and Naples yellow. For this page, I'm doing two kinds of flowers. Because I'd done spring blooms, I thought I would find some summery ones. A water lily, which I took at some lotus gardens that are only open in the summer, and this quinacridone rose is the exact colour, so that worked out really well. And I have to say, I really love the quinacridone rose and ultramarine turquoise in the summer set. I think both of these are fantastic colours, and I do get a summer feel from them. They also mix together to make a really gorgeous purple, so I added a bit of that into the water. But I'm afraid that Naples yellow is just not bright enough in my opinion. It made a very dull green, and I think I would replace the Naples yellow with Hansa yellow medium, which is much brighter, and it's also a little bit warmer than the Hansa yellow light. I think that would make a really great triad for summer. I've never really been a fan of Naples yellow. It's okay in some situations, but I just wasn't enjoying it in this particular trio of colours. I did my best with it though, and I'm moving on to another picture of a different kind of lily, a pink lily, but this was blooming in summertime as well. From my photo, I was able to get a relatively okay green background, but nowhere near as bright as what's in the picture. And I was letting that background dry, moving back to the first water lily, just adding in some details, and I was able to achieve a nice dark purple, which gave me a lot more scope to get some decent contrast and value in these paintings, and that's what I was missing from the spring set. The summer palette is definitely more versatile in that respect. Both the quinacridone rose and ultramarine turquoise in particular are very saturated and have a darker mass tone, so you can water them down to get lighter colours, but you can also use them a lot darker, and I really like being able to have that versatility. In my previous swatching video, I was thinking that the quinacridone rose was the one that was throwing me off with this triad, but actually I really love it now that I've been using it, and it's definitely the Naples yellow which was causing me some issues. But the rose and turquoise were fabulous together, and they made some really nice mixes. I was able to get that much darker colour, and I was a lot happier with this page. It was just going a lot more smoothly than my spring blooms, which were a total mess. And actually, the Naples yellow does look quite pretty in the background of this particular lily painting. I do like it, it's just not nice and bright, which is what I really want for summer. That's what I think of straight away when it comes to summer. I'm using a bit of white pen just to add in some highlights and define some of the petals, adding in a bit more shadow and a few other details. I felt like these two paintings were really leaning heavily into the rose and turquoise, not so much with the Naples yellow, so I was thinking I should try and get some Naples yellow going in some of my other paintings, but I'll just finish these two up with those pen details. I'm really glad I had that white pen, it helped a lot to get some nice highlights in there. And here's the finished page, which I enjoyed more than I was expecting to. Going to the other page, and I tried to pick some different themed pictures here. This first one I photographed in New Zealand during summer, and that turquoise is absolutely perfect for the water. A photo of my feet lounging on a beach in Greece, and another boat picture from New Zealand. I was really trying to incorporate that Naples yellow into my summery pictures, and I at least had a few from summer where I had that colour in there. It's definitely a great colour for sand. and I tried to incorporate it into my backgrounds as well. There's no actual blue in the set. I attempted to make it by adding a tiny bit of rose into the turquoise, and I got somewhat of a dull sky blue, and then I'm painting in that Naples yellow to get my sand, plus it's also the colour of that boat. So I guess technically yes, it is a summery colour. It's just not the yellow I would have chosen because I don't feel it's quite versatile for everything I would want to paint with it. To be fair, that's kind of all of the sets though, because 3 colours is just not quite enough, unless maybe it's 3 really dark or bright primary colours, but otherwise I was missing a colour, it was the wrong shade, there wasn't enough value. There's always something that's going to make it hard when you're just working with a very limited 3 colour palette. But overall, I think I did pretty well with the summer colours, and they ended up being easier than I was expecting, mainly because I was able to achieve those darker values. And I would argue that values are so much more important than actual colour. Like, you can kind of make up the colours, it doesn't matter too much, but having or not having those value contrasts really does make or break a painting. I haven't finished yet, but I decided to remove the tape because that throws me off sometimes when I can't see the picture against the white paper. I've got my trusty white gel pen out to add in some highlights and other details. I really didn't spend a huge amount of time on these paintings. I was just trying to get in quick sketches without getting stuck too much into detail, especially on this yacht one. I decided I was going to leave the background very loose and abstract and then just focus on the yacht itself in the foreground, drawing in the white lines for the mast. There's no way I was going to mask any of this off, it's just easier to draw it in with pen later, and then I was just adding in a few more details to the boat part and just making it look a bit more like an actual yacht instead of a white blobby mess there. That ultramarine turquoise is very pretty and it works very well as a sea colour. I do quite like how the Naples yellow mixed into the water on this painting as well. I think I probably should have left this black pen line off, but I couldn't help myself. I had to add in just a tiny bit of detail with it into the water, just to kind of add a bit more value. And here's this finished piece. I don't mind them, I actually quite like the colours in this. And here's the finished page spread, surprisingly better than I first thought it was going to be. The colours were quite summery for the pictures that I chose, obviously not for everything, but it was very successful on these lilies and also on my other summery scenes here. So I'm going to give this set a 9 out of 10. It loses a point for the Naples yellow, which is a nice colour, but I would have been happier with a brighter yellow. That's just my own personal preference. I'd love to know in the comments what you think of the summer set. Do you think it's worked out well, or would you prefer to have different colours in it? I'm really glad I was able to get some values out of this set though, because the spring one had driven me a bit crazy. Let's flip over to autumn now, shall we? I'm excited for this one. I was thinking quite a lot later that it didn't even occur to me to draw something like pumpkins, but I'm not going for pumpkins today. Maybe later though, because I think the colours would work really well. We have Aussie Red Gold, Rose of Ultramarine, and Undersea Green. Now right off the bat, this is, in my humble opinion, the best set in the Triad range. I loved it immediately. The colours are absolutely gorgeous, and they really say autumn to me. There are a lot of fungi that grow in autumn around the area that I live, and here's a couple of photos that I took which I'm working off in my paintings here. Adapted to fit the page, and of course I've got my limited colour palette, so I'm not going to get all of those colours exactly right. The one thing this set arguably is missing is a really bright red, but I absolutely love the Rose of Ultramarine and Aussie Red Gold together, and together they do mix quite a decent red, so it wasn't too much of a problem. Although I lost control of the paint on this picture a little bit. I was painting with a large quill brush quite often to get some really juicy mixes, and then I'm using a smaller round brush for those finer details because I figured the quill brush wouldn't be able to get into all of the tiny areas. The mushrooms on the right hand side are an absolute mess at the moment. I will be fixing those up as I go along. It's just getting that first layer down, trying to get in the dark and light areas. What I love about the set is that the colours do get really dark, so I was able to achieve a lot of values once again. Rose of Ultramarine and Undersea Green both have a really beautiful granulation in them. And how can I not love Aussie Red Gold? What I like about it is the fact that it's very orange when you paint it out in its mass tone, but if you dilute it, it starts to go a lovely golden yellow colour, so it's quite versatile for that. Other yellows which do a similar thing is quinacridone gold, and also nickel azure yellow tends to do that as well. Aussie Red Gold is a bit more orange than those two, and it's just a beautiful colour. And it's really perfect for autumn, although I think it would have been great for desert horizons as well. Some of the colours in the Triad sets could definitely go into multiple sets. And of course not everyone is going to like the choices in the Triads. I've been trying to judge them as fairly as possible, although of course there are some sets which I just naturally gravitate towards over others, and that's part of my own personal preference. Everyone is allowed to like different things, so if you don't agree with some of the things I've been saying, that's perfectly fine. This is just my own impressions based around the painting experiences that I've had. I'm not too sure about the shadow. It's in the photo, but it doesn't really translate well to my painting. Oh well, it's there now, and I'm adding in a few little spots onto this fly amanita, or is it an agaric? I can never remember my mushroom terminology. I've actually done this painting as a small oil painting in a previous video, in case you're wondering if it looks familiar. That's why. It just seemed like a perfect photo for this particular triad of colours. And then I've got these other little fungi which were growing off the trees. They were quite muted by comparison, so I've mixed in Aussie Red Gold with Undersea Green for the most part in these mushrooms, although there is a little bit of Rose of Ultramarine there, but I've left the rose mostly for the background in with the undersea. I'm just adding in another layer of both of those colours together just to make it darker and then make the mushrooms really stand out from the background. The Undersea Green and Rose of Ultramarine mix together really beautifully. They create some gorgeous shadow colours and this really dark brown colour, which I love, plus all of that granulation. It's such a nice combination. And I really love how these two paintings turned out. It's such a beautiful trio of colours. For the other page, and I'm going to do a full page painting this time, I saw this autumn leaf trapped in a web, and I thought this would be perfect to paint, although I was not able to achieve a bright green background because Undersea Green is very muted, and mixing it with Aussie Red Gold, it's got that orange tint, so I was able to achieve this greenish gold colour. And I'm just going to leave the background very neutral and focus mainly on the leaf in the foreground. But I did add a few little drips just to add a little bit of interest into that background. Let it fully dry. I've peeled off the tape because I'm not going to do anything else to the background. And now to go in with the leaf with these absolutely stunning colours. It's not going to be exactly the same as the photograph. I just used it to get a general idea of where I should place reds and greens by comparison. So I'm basically just dropping in all three colours and letting them mix together, mixing them a little bit on my palette but mostly on the paper, and I did go back a few times just to fix things up as I went along. What I really love about all three of these colours is how heavily saturated they are, so I was able to achieve some very bold colours on the leaf but also have a fairly gentle background by mixing the colours on a palette and adding in a bunch of water to dilute that colour down. But for the leaf, I'm using the paints almost straight from the palette and just dropping them on, mixing in just a tiny bit of water to retain as much colour as possible. I always really love heavily saturated and pigmented colours like these ones. They're just so much easier to work with, and I always have a more fun time using them. I find lower tinting colours really frustrate me a lot of the time, unless I'm using them for something specific where I only want a really light colour. So as I was saying early in the video, I can see these being used for pumpkins as well. I might have to just paint something, even if it's in my own time, just because I really want to test that out and see how this colour combination would work for that. I'd love to know in the comments your ideas for paintings with this particular set, or any of the other sets that I've talked about today, because I'm sure people take different inspiration than what I have when looking at certain colour palettes, and I'm always interested to know how other people view colours and what it inspires them to think of straight away. The autumn one was probably one of the easier ones for me. I already had ideas for it when I first saw the colours. Now I'm drawing in some white lines, which are the spider web. They weren't so visible in my photograph, so I'm just making this up a little bit, but I really wanted it to be hanging suspended rather than just in thin air. It's anchored to those spider webs, and then I'm just using that white pen to add in a little bit of highlight, just to make it stand out and hopefully look a little more three-dimensional. I had so much fun painting this particular picture. It was such a joy to use these colours. I'm using mostly Rose of Ultramarine to paint in some dark leaf veins, and just to finish the entire thing off, I'm using a fine detail paintbrush for that because my other two brushes were a bit too large. And here is my leaf in web. I think this is definitely my favourite painting of the day. It's also my favourite page spread, even though I haven't got to winter yet. I just adored the colours. I had the best time with this, and they were the easiest to paint of everything because I knew exactly what I wanted. The granulation is spectacular, and they are just really beautiful colours. I recommend them even if you don't have them as a triad, but just in your set of colours. They're so beautiful, and they have a lot of fun uses. This set gets an 11 out of 10. It's so good I had to add an extra point. I'm going to say it's the best triad of all of them. Fun colours, granulation, and lots of value range, so what's not to like about it for me? Except of course if you want red or blue, forget about it then. But speaking of bluer colours, let's move on to the very last page spread. That is winter, and I've got some interesting ones here. Winter in Australia. Well, it's certainly not going to be snowing or anything like that, although it does snow in alpine regions. In Melbourne, picture cold and dreary with no snow, although heavy frosts sometimes. Deciduous trees, but also a lot of native ones which don't lose their leaves. Evergreens. Here's Lunar Black, French Ultramarine, and Cascade Green. And actually, this worked out pretty well for my first photo, taken at the Dandenong Botanical Gardens. They built a replica of a winning entry in the Chelsea Garden Show a few years ago, and this is what it looked like on a wintry day. I'm mostly using the larger quill brush with the smaller brush for a few details, and a lot of this painting is actually done with Cascade Green. You can see it splits out into blue once you start adding water to it. It's a really fascinating colour. And this trio actually worked out pretty well for the kinds of colours we see in winter here. Very cool greens and blue, and also that dark lunar black, which is an incredibly granulating colour, as we'll see in a little while. Colour-wise, this is a very limited palette. It's basically blue and green, but there is a lot of range with the values, so that's where it gets its points. The fact that the colours are all very dark, but you can paint them out and get lovely dilute mixes as well, so it just makes that a lot more versatile. But if you want red or yellow, forget about it. So we're just in one tiny part of the colour spectrum here. Once I'd added in all of the green, I'm then going in with that lunar black and a little bit of the blue sometimes, just to get in the rest of the details. A lot of this picture is actually meant to be brown, but I don't have brown and no way to mix it either, so I just went for black and grey, giving this whole painting quite a monochromatic look. Maybe duochrome, there's a bit of blue in with that green as well. I just started off with light layers and I'll be building them up as I go along. I was thinking at this point, oh dear, it's looking pretty messy, and I just needed to trust in the process, knowing that once I add some more layers on, it's going to start looking a lot better. I painted this one pretty quickly, and I wanted to keep it quite loose and sketchy without getting bogged down in the details, as I mentioned in a couple of my other ones where I was thinking the same thing. I only had a certain amount of time to film these videos, and I really didn't want to get stuck on one painting, getting caught up in the details and stressing myself out. I just really wanted to try and get paintings out that weren't too time consuming, but I was able to showcase all of the colours as best as I could. And this one was a little bit nerve-wracking to begin with because it really is a detailed photo, but I was able to simplify it quite a lot just by adding in bold strokes for the foliage and then adding in the rock detail around it. adding in some of the French ultramarine into the green just to get a bit of variety there, so it's not all just one colour. The sky was white, but I added in just a tiny bit of ultramarine at the top so that I would have some line definition between that and the paper when I peel the tape off, as you can see there. And then I just added in a small amount of white pen for some highlights, and I decided to leave it at that. It's not fully rendered, but I actually really like how it is at the moment, and I don't want to ruin it by adding too much detail. I think it has quite a wintry feel to it. Now onto my other page. This has moved away from the winter theme because I had thought of something else which I just knew would be perfect for these three colours. Nearby the Botanic Gardens is another place in the hills not far from where I live called the William Ricketts Sanctuary. William Ricketts created all of these amazing sculptures of Aboriginal people, and the colours in this triad were just perfect for them. Although I made a mess of the one over here, and so I'm actually going to turn this into something else. But I wanted to keep at least one sculpture, and this one's not very good either, but I had fun painting it. Tragically, in 2021 there was a massive storm up around the hills, which blew down heaps of the trees around that area, and I think it actually completely destroyed the park. It's still closed 4 years later, with no signs of reopening. I don't know if they can rescue any of the sculptures or if they were just completely ruined, so it's very sad. I'm extremely grateful we went when we did, about 10 years ago, and I took a lot of photos. I actually think it was in winter when we went up there, so there you go. The sculptures were incredible, carved out of natural wood and stone, part of the environment. I'm so glad we got to see it, and I'm so sad that it might not be there anymore, but I just thought I would do a little tribute to it. These colours were a lot of fun to work with. They're very granulating, they're all dark, and so I was able to get lots of shadow out of them, but also get those lighter tones as well. I'm not very good at painting faces. I made a bit of a mess of the eyes, but never mind, I'll just keep going, and I'll get something out of this eventually. Tell me in the comments what your ideas are on the winter palette. Does it suit your environment, or is it not quite right? I actually think it does work pretty well for Melbourne. The duller tones, but also the green colours for our evergreen trees, and also trees like pines and spruces are very much that cascade green colour. That rock on the left-hand side was not working well in my picture, so I ended up painting over most of that and making it less prominent. I could see these colours being used for the ocean as well. It just makes me think of nautical themes, particularly ships, and that really green colour you get with the ocean sometimes. Maybe even a stormy sea. In fact, these colours would probably be quite good for a storm scene, and could have been possibly used for Stormbreaker, which was one of the themes in my previous video. Cascade green is a really versatile colour just on its own because it does split out into the blue as well, and it's a noticeable split. Now the picture on the left, I decided I wasn't going to turn into the sculpture because I had already lost the drawing. I'm going to turn this into an abstract aurora in the sky and make it more of a wintry scene once again, because I didn't think this page was wintry enough, and I really wanted to try and stay on theme because I had done so with all of the other triads. I'm just peeling the tape off again so I can see the pictures more clearly, and then I'm just painting in some mountains. I'm making this up as I go along, using that lunar black in its mass tone. Everything was looking very dark, so I'm using the white pen to add in a bit of a galaxy and make it look more like a sky, with those aurora kind of colours into it. Being in the southern hemisphere, it's Aurora Australis. Just adding in a few white lines as well to make it look more interesting, and then I'm getting in some white paint pen with some heavier acrylic ink to paint some snow on the mountains, and I'll just imagine it's somewhere like Tasmania or the South Island of New Zealand or Antarctica to get that southern winter snowy vibe going on. I think the white paint pen made this really stand out, and I think this page spread came together quite nicely even though they're two completely random pictures. And here's my mostly winter page spread. It's the most random of the four of them today, but I really enjoyed what I painted, and they were lovely colours to use. I'm probably going to give this about a 9 out of 10. I know that's quite high as well, mainly because I really like the colours and the ability to have a lot of range with the values, but it is quite limited. There's no reds or yellows, so you're probably not going to be able to paint that much with it, although I got more than I thought I was going to, and the colours are just so lovely on their own. My sculptural picture's probably the weakest of them. I actually really like the Aurora Australis. I think that turned out really well considering I had stuffed that up in the first place. I've just covered all of my pencil up with that. And I'll just finish off with a flip through of all 4 page spreads I did, starting off with the very bright psychedelic spring. I really liked the colours, but it was let down by the lack of values that I was able to achieve. Then we flip over to summer, which I think was the most surprising palette. I didn't think I was going to get as much out of it as I actually did. There's more value variety, I just wish the yellow was a brighter one. I love the rose and the turquoise though. Next up is my favourite palette of all of them, the autumn one. All 3 colours are beautiful. I have nothing negative to say. I just really enjoyed painting with these. They're a real pleasure to use. And last up is winter, a much colder palette. I can feel the cold coming off these pages, so I think in that respect it's a pretty successful triad as well. And I still have more pages to fill in this book. Hopefully I can keep Bectober going. Here's my very messy paint palette where I did all of my mixes. It is really satisfying when a paint palette gets like this though. I know that creation has happened, and now I have half a book full of paintings. And that's all of the Triad paintings done from all 8 sets over 2 videos. I really hope you've enjoyed these and it's given you some inspiration, as it did for me. I can't believe I've filled so many pages already, and it's only halfway through October. I will do a flip through of the whole book once I've completely finished it. Thank you so much if you've gotten through this whole video. I really hoped you enjoyed it. Come back to see what else I paint in here. Please give this video a thumbs up and a hype. I'd really appreciate that. Subscribe for more videos. Here's the first video of Triads, and here's the full swatch of them. Have a great day, and I'll see you all again in my next video for more Bectober shenanigans. Swatch you later. Bye!